Hello, welcome to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr, and it is such a joy to be here tonight with you. How are you? How are you coping during these times of vast uncertainty? Well, I will tell you that based on my 20 years of broadcasting cutting-edge health and mindset information, I am very excited about tonight's show. I love doing this because I get to talk with people that are cutting-edge scientists in preventative health, mindfulness. Yes, that's a science as well. And we are doing that tonight with Dr. Bruce Lipton, providing facts, providing connection, consistency. Just being here with you is what we need. And on top of all that, Dr. Bruce Lipton is joining us, who is an internationally recognized leader in bridging science and spirit, a cellular biologist, best-selling author of Biology of Belief. He is joining us tonight to talk about immune system, how it works and how it is working with COVID-19 and how you can strengthen your immune system, as well as talking about antibodies and stress and what it does for major disease and all sorts of great things. Ultimately, our conversation will talk and end in evolution. So we will be right back. I am Lisa Garr, and you are listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr, and I'm really looking forward to tonight's conversation. We're going to be talking about facts, and we're going to be talking about something that we all are interested in, which is how to permanently boost our immune system, but really from a cellular level. We're going to get granular on this one because to learn how the cells work in our body, the basic systems of how the cells work is going to help us understand how to deal with COVID-19 and what we're dealing with in today's unprecedented changing world. Welcome to the show, Dr. Bruce Lipton. Such a great joy to have you here.
Lisa, I am so excited to be with you yet again and so appreciative of this opportunity to speak to this audience that is clearly concerned, involved, and wants to know what's going on. So thanks for this opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about, first of all, our how the cell functions work. And the cells work in a community, basically, right? Can you tell us a little about the order?
Yeah. First, an insight is this. When we say you look at a human, you look at yourself in the mirror and you say there's a single human, single organism. Well, that organism is actually a community of 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living entity. So when I say Bruce or you say Lisa, that's a name for 50 trillion cells, a community. And as a community, the name implies they all work together in harmony. And very interesting is when you look at the human and you see all the characteristics of a human biology, respiration, digestion, excretion, muscle contraction, immune system, reproductive system, and all that, all of those functions are present in almost all of the 50 trillion cells that you have. The reason I bring that up is to have people recognize that the functions of a human are basically present in every single cell, and that the community of cells just manifests a larger version of themselves, so to speak. And I say, why is it relevant? Because if you understand the nature of how the cells live in community, then this is the principle that humans should be following to live in community, because 50 trillion citizens make up that human body. And understanding the dynamics of that is fundamental to understanding the dynamics of humans as cells, each of us being a cell, in the body of something bigger called humanity. The word humanity is a organism. We are humanity, and we are cells. And so the beautiful part about understanding the nature of cells is that if you understand how cells work in community and everything, they have an economy, they've got
I was going to ask,
everything going on.
Do they have leaders? Do they have followers? How does that work? How do they get along?
So the idea is this: is that cells like us have a nervous system. It's not the nucleus with the genes, and this is where people have been confused for years because they say the cell is controlled by the genes. This is a very false statement. Genes control nothing. Let's just clear this up because everyone is of the idea of genes controlling your life, and I want to say no. What is a gene? It's a blueprint to make a molecule called a protein. I say, so what does that mean? I say, well, what are the genes in the human body? I say, they make the parts, the proteins that create the cells, and then the cells create us. So a protein is a building block of a human body. It gives its anatomy and it gives it function. And I say, so what's the relevance? I say, well, genes are blueprints. They're used to make this molecule. And I say, so why is it relevant? And I say, well, because listen to how people have attributed everything. The genes did this and the genes caused that.
Cancer and genetics, yes.
And I go, no, a gene is a blueprint by all technical definition. I say, why is it relevant? I say, well, take a look at this picture in your mind. You're at an architect's office. She's working on a blueprint. And you lean over her shoulder and you say, is your blueprint on or off? And all of a sudden she'll look at you like, what, are you crazy? It's a blueprint. There's no on and off. It's a blueprint. I go, precisely. A gene does not have an on and off. A gene does not regulate itself. A gene has no functional awareness of what it is. It has no more awareness of what it is as a blueprint is compared to the house that is created from that blueprint.
It's just a map, right?
What's that?
It's just a map, right?
It's a physical blueprint to make the parts. And I say, so why is it relevant? I say, because there's a contractor. We've been given given the belief that the genes turn on and off. The genes control the function. I go, no, they're blueprints, but there's a contractor that controls the blueprints, the assembly, and the function of this. And I say, well, who's the contractor? Mm-hmm. And it comes down to the mind. Our minds are contractors that will send an image to the body through our consciousness that shapes the body to conform to the consciousness.
So
and I go, what does that mean? I say, well, if you're living in health and happiness and joy, then your body, by definition, is following the blueprints of happiness and joy, and you have a good thing going. If you live in fear, you build a different structure.
That's what is happening now. That is actually, it is a lot of what's happening now is constant fear programming.
And this is the crux of the story that we're going to get into for a simple reason is this. I could look at, here's a simple experiment. And I put cells in a petri dish, and I put in the dish a little place where nutrients are. I said, well, if I put the dish back in the incubator and come back later, where are the cells? And you find that the cells move to the nutrients, and they assimilate them, take them in, okay? And then I say, okay, another petri dish, same cells, but this time I put a little pool of toxins. And I say, where are the cells? I say, complete opposite side of the dish, and they're closed down in protection. I say, well, what's the point? Organisms, be they cells or people, move towards stimuli that give us growth. And as we move toward these stimuli, we go open arm to take things in. It could be nutrition, it could be love. If somebody's offering love, you run to them, arms open, take it in, assimilation. And I go, okay, but in contrast, if there's a threat, I say, do you go to the threat? I say, no, you don't go to the threat. You go the opposite way. And I said, do you keep yourself open? I say, no, you close yourself down and protect you.
Right.
And I go, so what's the relevance? I say, a cell or a human cannot move toward growth and be in protection at the same time. They're opposite behaviors completely. Growth to the stimulus, open, protection, away from the stimulus, closed. You can't do both at the same time. So I say, so what's the relevance of that? And I go, well, the human body has a mechanism designed to deal with growth and protection. I say, well, what's protection? In this case, I say the adrenal glands. And in high school, we all connected them with fight or flight. Yeah, that's the one that mobilizes us to run and fight. I go, so the adrenal gland is mobility and all that. And I say, well, what's the function of the adrenal gland? I say, well, if I'm stressed or fear something, proverbial saber-toothed tiger, that one, okay? The tiger's coming. I say, what is my behavior? First thing is this, you're obviously not going to run to the tiger with your arms open. You're going to run
Some
away
are.
from the
There's a
tiger
series like that, but on Netflix there is. But yes.
So the important part about this is, and this is the crux of the issue, it takes energy to run away from the threat, okay? And I say, Well, it takes energy to do a lot of things. The immune system takes a lot of energy. I mean, think of this. If you've ever been sick, it uses so much energy, you may not even have the energy to get out of bed.
Right.
So the immune system uses a lot of energy. And growth uses a lot of energy. So I say, okay, just a concept in your head here. You're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, and you're in charge of energy in your body, where it's going to go. And I give you this scenario. I said, well, we were going to do a little growing, and I wanted to protect you from a bacterial infection, but we're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. How would you distribute your energy? And the answer, I hope, is a no-brainer, is I want all of the energy to run away from that tiger. And so here's the fact. This is the fact. Stress hormones, when released into the body, shut down all functions not associated from escaping the stress, the saber-toothed tiger. All functions that are not going to contribute to your getting away from that tiger are going to be shut down, so I could allocate the energy, all of the energy, to escape that tiger. Because if you don't escape the tiger, then there's no other functions anyway now.
Right. They're not needed.
The point is, but we grow every day. We have to replace cells, filter the system, clean up the act. So the system of growth, all the organs in your gut are maintenance and growth and health organs. Okay, so the gut, its function is to help the body stay healthy and grow. And I say, so what's the relevance? And here, listen to this. The first moment of fear hits, stress hormones are released. I go, yeah, so what? And I say, they're going to redirect the energy of the body. And I say, how do they do that? I say, the first thing they do is cause the blood vessels in the gut to constrict, squeeze shut. I say, so what does that do? I say, well, it pushes the blood more to the periphery, arms and legs. And the blood is where the energy is. So the moment you have a fear, you get a queasy feeling, butterflies in the stomach, they call it. And I say, what is that? And I said, that's actually the blood vessels shutting down. You could feel them shutting down as they're pushing the blood to the arms and legs because you're going to get ready to run. So the first thing that happens when stress hormones go into the system is it shuts down growth, because it's not relevant from running from that tiger. And the blood is now being pushed extra to the arms and legs, which will energize my escape. And now comes the second one, and this is now the most relevant point, is that, as I mentioned, the immune system uses tremendous amount of energy. So if you have a bacterial infection and you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, both of them require energy. And I go, yeah, but I still say, how are you going to distribute the energy? And the answer is simple. It's like the hell with the bacteria. I want all the energy to run. If I get away, we're going to deal with that bacteria. So the point that's really critical is this, and this is a fact of science. Stress hormones shut down the immune system to conserve energy to run away from the proverbial tiger. And I go, so why is it relevant? I said, listen how effective it is, and then we'll discuss it. But here's how effective the stress hormones are. When doctors want to transplant an organ from person A into a recipient, person B, you have to recognize that the organ, when it's transplanted into the recipient, is foreign tissue. And by all rules of biology, the immune system is going to reject the graft as fast as it can. And I say, so what do they do to help when you transplant a heart, a kidney, or a lung? They give the patient stress hormones before the operation because the stress hormones inhibit the function of the immune system. So when the graft is made, the immune system is not aggressive in rejecting it.
It doesn't take it.
So I say,
that makes sense.
The value of that stress hormone in regard to shutting off the immune system is used therapeutically. So all of a sudden the issue is, do stress hormones shut down the immune system? The answer is, well, yeah, it's a no-brainer. Of course it does.
And so now, is that same system getting shut down when we watch or listen to news that says it's going to get worse this weekend?
100%.
Okay.
100%. As soon as you start getting stress, and it doesn't even have to be that news, just think about this. How many people are isolated at this moment who are not working? All of a sudden, it's like, oh, my God, it's like, well, that's survival right there. How the hell am I going to eat? How am I going to pay for my
What's
rent?
the new normal?
How's stress?
Yes. And
these are the things that are functional in shutting down the immune system. When we're in a state of protection, growth shuts off. As a matter of fact, I always remember laughing when George Bush was president and we had 911. And for the first few days after 911, he was on the TV every day. Be afraid. They're coming. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they are. They're coming to get us. And for about 3 or 4 days, that was exactly the message coming. And I remember about the 5th day, the message was, don't forget, America is open for business.
I know. I remember that. Yes, because they didn't want the economy to tank. Yeah.
Well, because when people are in protection, growth stops. The country stops. Like it is now. And I go, so what's the relevance? I say, you can't be in growth while you're at the same time advertising threat. It doesn't work. And the more fear you throw in, the greater the stress, the more disempowerment we have, and most importantly, the more we shut down the immune system and we invite problems at that moment.
So this is a global fear that's happening. It's not just this country. I mean, it's a global fear. You are in New Zealand, and I'd love to know, how is it there in terms of the level of fear and the news and so forth? What is the energy?
I love it because our premier, Jacinda Ardern, one of the most wonderful leaders in the entire world. I'm so happy to have experienced her. She came on today. It was a very important announcement to tell the public that the Easter Bunny is an essential process, and it will not be restricted by the isolation. So,
wow.
Calmed everybody down. Easter Bunny's coming, no problem.
Oh my goodness!
But the thing was this: she took notice of what was happening. She put I'm not using the word lockdown because it's not a lockdown. It's more of an isolation policy. Just do your best to isolate. And I saw a headline on the news from the U.S., I think the Washington Post, said New Zealand not only flattened the curve, it squashed the curve. Essentially has, just by putting in the idea of not congregating in large groups and isolation, essentially has stemmed this whole thing at this point.
Has that truly happened from being there? Is that true in New Zealand?
Absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely, and it's just that, I love being here because for me, and I travel the world, of course, right now New Zealand, as it's always been to me, is like the eye of a hurricane. The world is crazy all around here, spinning.
And it's calm.
It seems to be much more peaceful and quiet. We're out of the way. We're not in anybody's line that somebody's going to place X and they stop in New Zealand on the way. No, you're either going to New Zealand or you're not going.
Right, it is out of the way. Now,
out of the way, and it's always taken care of itself because it's so far away from major centers that it has a psychology to the community here that we take care of ourselves. We've always done it.
Yes,
so,
it is
very strong.
Beautiful areas too. Now, tell me, if with all the travel that you've done, did you experience any symptoms? Were you sick? I mean, you were on the road constantly.
Well, I may have. There was a period before New Year's where I had a dry cough for a while, and it affected me a little bit. I was just more tired, so I could have had it. It's very important for people to understand this, that where they've done like entire cities, test the entire city, all the population in a city, they have found that those that carry the virus, about 50% of those that carry the virus have no symptoms whatsoever.
How is that possible? Tell me how scientifically that is possible, to have no symptoms and you have a deadly disease in you, virus in you.
Because you have a very strong immune system. That's what the difference is your immune system up to snuff. If it's up to snuff and working in its full-out power, man, that's the design of the system, is to manage that stuff and handle it. But if you compromise that immune system, and I say, well, what compromise? I say, well, first of all, stress is the biggest compromise. I say, once you weaken the system, then the aggressiveness of any infective agent is much worse. The stronger the immune system, the more effective it is in keeping you safe and healthy. The weaker it is, the more you're susceptible to an illness and the expression of that illness. So there's a range of people that get the virus, and the range is essentially, I have no symptoms whatsoever. to those that have what are called respiratory distress. Now, let me just, because we're going to talk about this a little bit longer, so let's make an important distinction here so we don't have to repeat it a lot.
Okay, because we do have just a minute before the break, but go right ahead.
Okay, and here's exactly what it is. The people that are most susceptible to the flu, and it is a flu, there's always the same cohort, always the same. It's the people that are very old whose systems are compromised, people in nursing homes especially who are being supported, and anybody who has an illness that compromises the immune system, which could be anything from cardiovascular disease to cancer to diabetes. Pre-existing situations like that are compromising. I say, if you are in a compromised group, and those are the ones that face the problem of mortality, the more compromised you are, the more this flu is effective. If you're in that group, let me just acknowledge this, and then we don't have to repeat it, I hope, and that is simply this. If I was in that group, I would take every precaution suggested to maintain my health, my isolation.
To protect yourself. Yes, we have to take a quick break. I'm so sorry. We'll get back to that main point when we come back. I'm Lisa Garr. You're listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. My guest is cellular biologist Dr. Bruce Lipton, author of The Biology of Belief and Spontaneous Evolution. And we were talking before the break, Bruce, about the immune system and immune compromised people or respiratory susceptible people that have upper respiratory susceptibility. Do you have any advice for people in that particular community or that sector of people? And is it, if you have a healthy immune system, are there a different set of rules?
I think what we have to do is alleviate the fear, first of all,
okay,
about this particular epidemic that's happening right now, because the fear is motivated by what are called the mortality numbers.
Yes.
And, every year there's flu season, and every year they say, flu season's coming, get your shots, and people just take it in stride. And every year, about 0.1% of the population dies from the flu every year, okay? Mm-hmm. That's always happening. But who are those that die? And I said, those that are compromised, and especially the older people, which are really compromised to some degree, those are the ones. And I say, if you're in that community, as you said, what can you do? And I say, it's the same thing I would do as if I was in any community. And that number one is, first of all, take care of my health. That is the number one thing. And that means eating really good, nutritious, organic, non-industrial farm food, because the chemistry of industrial farm food is not really supportive. That's a problem. Number two, I would take any kinds of supplements and vitamins, and especially vitamin C in large doses, because that is one of the most effective agents in enhancing immune function, vitamin C.
How large of a dose? Just give us an idea.
Lastly, and most importantly as well, is
Bruce,
focusing on fear.
Yeah, that's a big one. But tell us the dosage of the vitamin C. That is important.
Absolutely. It's historically been that way, and I guess not really supported by the conventional pharmaceutical people who that's not a drug, it's a vitamin, so they're not happy with that. But
are you doing like
issues.
3 grams an hour or 10 grams a day, or how much?
Yeah, over 2 grams a day for sure. 3 grams is good, and 4 grams. It doesn't hurt, and it's one of the most important elements in enhancing immune system function.
Can you take it?
Historically has been so.
Can you take it hourly, or is it body just going to eliminate what it doesn't use?
I take mine in the morning,
mm-hmm.
and that's it, and let it go. And I'm sure not caught up in the fear for the rest of the day as well. The fear is an unfortunate advertising ploy. And I say that for a very important reason, because the statistics are so skewed to not give us a real picture. And the statistics are what they're using, these statistics, to throw the fear out, because, as I said, every year there's the flu season and nobody gets crazed. They, get the flu shot, nobody gets crazy. And this year the flu season comes with the warning, we're all going to die.
Well, this is now, I've had interviews about this not being the flu. This is not the same strain. It acts differently. It doesn't behave exactly like the flu because of the level of contagion and the mortality rate.
Okay, now here's why it's more, and I'll use the word aggressive, than a conventional flu, okay? and that is this. Conventional flus, which are coronaviruses as well, rhinoviruses are another. There's a little family of viruses that cause the flu. Let's understand why they cause the flu and why it's always in colder weather, and the answer is this. These viruses go into the respiratory system. I say why? Because they need to grow, but they can't grow well at body temperatures, which is like 98.6 or 37 centigrade. They don't grow well at that temperature. They grow at lower temperatures. I say, so how can you be in a body and grow at a lower temperature? And the answer is the respiratory tract is breathing outside air. And I go, yeah, so what? I say, well, in the winter time, the air that it breathes is much colder, so the temperature, the average temperature in the respiratory tract is cooler than the body temperature. And this temperature is what supports the growth of flu viruses. So that's why they come in the winter time and they disappear more in the summertime, because the temperature of the respiratory tract is now lower than normal because of the colder air. So that's number one.
So don't go outside, you'll catch a cold is actually true?
Well, at some level is, if you keep breathing cooler air, the temperature of your respiratory tract is below 98.6, gets into the range. That's the optimum temperature for virus growth, which is much lower than 98.6. And so the idea is this: the colder the air you breathe, the more the viruses can grow. That's the simple thing. So that's why it's called a cold, more or less. It comes when it's cold. And I say, so what? And I say, so what's unique about this one? It's more aggressive. And I go, because previous strains, and all of us have had coronaviruses. If you've been around here for a few years, you inevitably have had them because that's the standard kind of virus. And I say, but the versions of the coronaviruses that we've had in the past, we hold a memory of. In other words, once you've been infected by something, you hold an immunological memory. If that thing ever comes back again, you can handle it better, okay? When you get a novel version of the coronavirus, if you don't have a memory of it, then it's going to affect almost everybody because you don't have a previous exposure. So then all of a sudden it says, oh, well, then most people are now susceptible to having an influence from this virus. And then I go, yes, that's true, but then I also go back and say, and the extent of the influence is how strong your immune system is. Mm-hmm. And that's why half of the people that were tested that had the virus didn't have any symptoms at all. And a lot of them have symptoms, but they're not great enough to go to a doctor or to a hospital.
Right.
And so there's this large portion of the population, more than 50% of them with the virus, that have no symptoms. And you go, so what? Now here's where the numbers are messing with your mind. And I go, how do you determine death rate? And the answer is you take the number of people that died and divide it by the number of people that have been reported to have the virus. Mm-hmm. I say, yeah, okay. And I say, well, the number of people reported are those that were sick enough to go to a doctor over this. And so I say that number is relatively small in regard to the total number of people that have had this virus and had not enough symptoms to seek medical attention. It's a flu, just like every other year. And I say, so why is it relevant? And the answer is the numbers are high, the mortality, because the number reported is not an accurate number. It's a very small number compared to those that have been infected. Mm-hmm. I say, why is it relevant? I say, if you took the entire population that has been infected that didn't get reported and then divide that into the number of deaths, it'll go below 1%. And I say normal year is 0.1% of people affected. So I'm saying, okay, it's more aggressive. And I say, why? Because immunological memory, we really don't have it because it's relatively new, so we have to be exposed to it. Those that, again, with good performing immune systems, don't really have any symptoms that they could, be bothered by, okay? So all of a sudden I say, so what does it mean? I say the idea that 3 to 4% of the population is going to die from this flu is like, that's a total exaggeration, so false and so scary. Because that's the one where they say, well, 2 million people could die.
Right.
But how did you get that number?
And that's why they say 57% of the people, at least as I've heard in the U.S., could have it if we did have 57% of the people that had it, and say 30% of those people did not report. Does that
30%, 50%.
50%, wow, of those people would report. But let's just take, for example, do those people that have it, that don't report or don't have the symptoms, do they have the antibodies?
But these are people who never went to a doctor or to a hospital.
Right, but would they still have the antibodies?
Comes from. That's where the report comes from. And I say, if you had a flu in previous years, you probably had the cold, you probably had a slight fever, you probably had respiratory problems.
And you probably have immunity to it. Mm-hmm.
We never reported it. Why? Because it was called the flu. We got healthy, whatever we did. And I say, why is it relevant? I said, because the statistics of mortality are based on a false number, a small number, because that's the small number that went to get reported. The large number didn't. So I say, yeah, if you divide the deaths by the large number, it's not 3 or 4%, it's less than 1%. And I say, oh, now you're talking about the kind of statistics that happen every year. For example, every year in the U.S., deaths from flu range from about 13,000 up to 60,000 people die every year from the flu.
Within a 4-month period,
where
actually.
Are we now?
Yeah.
We have like just less than 20,000. So they say, then it makes, you have to have 3 times as many deaths to even come to a regular year of flu. And it's like, you're scaring the hell out of people that everybody's going to die. And I said, those numbers are misleading and they're freaky. And the issue is this. People die every day anyway. There's no issue about that. How many people die every day?
Right.
I say, but on the CDC, well, it's actually the statistics department in the health.
From obesity, from smoking, from heart attacks, from getting hit by a car. Yes, people die every day.
But people that have heart attacks, people that are on the edge, people that already have pneumonia, or any of that, the law says that if the last thing they got, possibly, I use the word possibly, is the COVID-19 virus infection, then that's reported as the cause of death.
Right.
Jesus, these people were dying before any of this COVID stuff was happening anyway, and so then those skew the numbers because they weren't dying so much. They weren't dying from the COVID. They were dying from their own cardiac or cancer issues or whatever it is. But if they were, it's on this.
But people are saying you can't
from the government.
You can't compare the two, though. It's like comparing an orange to an airplane. You can't compare the two. This is what I've been hearing. But let's
Absolutely.
go. So how can you?
The idea is this: if you just look at those people that have the viruses and don't have the full out flu symptoms, and here's the other thing: what's the worst outside? Okay, so the group that we already said they're already the aged and those people whose immune systems are compromised. They're already on that special list. I said that's a separate list because if you're there, you're already on the edge. So you got to do everything to take care of yourself. But the point is, if you're not on that edge. Then I say, well, what's the average person gets the flu, this corona, and I say, what's the extreme? And they say, respiratory distress. I say, is that lethal? And the answer is no, it can be treated.
To non-immune compromised, yes.
So they scare them. Respiratory distress. Actually, they just find out the statistics are beginning to show up that the use of ventilators is, in fact, maybe killing people. So because they're trying these things out.
How would that? How would they kill people? Because it.
Do you know? I didn't know this myself, but to use a ventilator, you have to essentially put a person in a comatose. Put them into unconscious body comatose thing. You have to stop the muscles from breathing.
So the machine does it for you.
The pressure is coming from the ventilator, and so you can't have the diaphragm working. And so they have to give a person drugs which shut off their normal ventilation system. Well, that puts them in a very different mental state at that point, physiologically, okay? It changes what they are. That this procedure itself is very caustic. It's very harmful in itself. So the idea is it's now when they've been looking at it in ventilator studies, so many of the doctors are saying that the ventilator, when they gave the people the ventilators, it made them worse.
Because it weakens the system, or it takes the system off of its normal fighting ability?
Yeah,
possibly?
You have to disconnect the system and let the automatic machine work.
Right. That's
And
interesting.
the system is a tightly integrated mechanism beyond anything that we could even understand. The complexity of communication in the system, and you want to say, okay, shut it down. It's like, you can't just do that.
But maybe the system really isn't working to its best. I mean, if people really can't breathe, maybe that is the best thing to do. But let me ask you again about I didn't get the answer I needed about the antibodies. Do you think that even people that had this virus that didn't show symptoms could have the antibodies?
Yeah, sure.
Wow. That's great.
They can. And that's what the system is working on creating.
Yes.
And it takes about 3 or 4 days to get from the first day of the infection to actually get the production of the antibodies. But the point about it is this. It is relieving the consequences of it. It's reducing the aggressiveness of it in the process of dealing with it. So it didn't necessarily shut it right off, but since it's already armed and begins to work, it doesn't go as far as it would if the immune system was not working. That's the important part.
So what would be the difference between the body developing its own antibodies as a result of the immune system working? What's the difference between that and an external vaccine that is supposed to help you get the antibodies? How does the body work?
Well, this is unfortunately becomes one of the really big topics that is misunderstood. And it's misunderstood because the suggestion is if I inject a vaccine, I'm helping your immune system work on something. And I'm going, you are confusing the immune system by injecting anything. And the reason is this. There's an intelligence built into this system that takes care of our normal vaccination. We get vaccinated when we're kids. I say, with what, needles? I say, absolutely not.
Dirt.
Here's the point. The tonsils, tonsils, they're in my throat. I got tonsils. So I say, well, there's 3 pairs or 6 individual tonsils. And I say, look at the textbooks and see what they say that tonsils are all about. The first thing they say is tonsils in the throat are for protection of what? Anything, the openings in the head, all of them are connected to the throat, which is, of course, the mouth, the nose. The ears are connected by the eustachian tube. The eyes have tear duct drops going down into the throat as well. And I say, so all these are openings in the head. And I say, so why is it relevant? Because it says the environmental antigens, those things that we live in the world, some of them, of course, toxic and others not relevant, these are in the environment. And they say, oh, well, they come into the holes, and here's the conventional story where it's wrong, is they say the tonsils are there for protection in that they will ward off anything that comes down the throat from any of those openings and protect you from those things that got into your system. And so the idea is that tonsils are there to fight the response of what's coming in, okay? Here's the fact. Number one, the throat, the lining of the throat, is the thickest of cellular linings inside the body. So if there's going to be infection, the last place it will occur is in the throat. Because if you go down the digestive tract a little bit, the rest of the tract is a single layer of cells, just single layer of cells. The throat is many, many layers of cells. It's very thick. It's a protection thing, okay? So I say, then this is the last place there would be an infection because the germs can't get through that wall.
It's built that way to actually defend itself. From the first lines of defense are closer to the outside. Okay.
But it's not that's the point. It's not for defense. Here's the real story. The tonsils have channels, little openings to the throat. I say, well, what is that for? If you want protection, what the hell do you want to make a connection with the inside, the outside? And the answer is this. The tonsils are learning centers for the immune system. That whatever is going down the throat, a small sample, 1/1000th of whatever you just swallowed, were going through the little channels into the tonsils. In the tonsils are immune cells that are immature. And their function is to identify things that came in from the environment and then learn them, so that there's immunological learning and memory of what was in the environment. Now, think about it. This is why infants unconsciously, habitually, will stick everything they can in their environment into their mouth.
Yes.
Everything. And
But when you do it with the vaccine does not go through the proper channels. And we're going to continue this conversation when we come back. This is fascinating with cellular biologist Dr. Bruce Lipton. I am Lisa Garr. You're listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr, and my guest is cellular biologist Dr. Bruce Lipton. We were just speaking before the break about antibodies. And if you are in the percentage of people that didn't know that you had the coronavirus, or if you did, you have developed the antibodies. Now, the question is, what's the difference between the body developing its own antibodies and a vaccine that helps the system develop antibodies through this injection system? So if you could please spell that out for us, Bruce, that would be great.
It's fundamentally important for this reason. The system has already been designed to handle the creation of vaccines. I mean, people have been living hundreds of thousands of years before medical school and doctors were here. There's a natural mechanism. If you understand the natural mechanism, and I say I want to encourage vaccine development, then I would employ the natural mechanism, which is oral ingestion. Now, I say, why is it a problem if I take a needle and put the vaccine in? And I say, because we have failed to really fully understand the intelligence of our biological system. It's more intelligent than we are, really. If they can handle 50 trillion citizens and have a healthy body, they're keeping a lot of harmony in there. And the significance is there's an intelligence to the immune system. It is completely aware of when infections occur and how infections occur so they can deal with it. When you take a needle and inject a vaccine, you bypass the entire intelligence of that system.
Okay.
All of a sudden, there's this poison, so to speak, in the middle of the cellular community, and everybody's going, where the hell did that come from? So there's no understanding of it, how it got there, how am I going to deal with it, because there's no information that came from where it came from. And so when you bypass the intelligence, you've interfered with the process itself. And this becomes really very critical in the story of vaccines, this is what we're talking about. And I go, what's the story about vaccines? I say, as we mentioned, the normal way that a child gets vaccinated is orally by having it stick everything from the environment somehow into its mouth. That's how it learned. And then we started vaccinating children with the belief that by putting that needle into a baby and putting this in, I'm going to enhance the function of the immune system. Well, actually, it interferes with the function of the immune system. Number one, because a child's immune system isn't even really fully developed until about age 2.5 to 3. I say, why is it relevant? It's a process mechanism. It's creating, it's organizing itself, and then all of a sudden it gets overloaded when a vaccine gets thrown into the body. It's like overwhelming a system that's not even fully developed. As a matter of fact, a baby's system depends on nursing, because the baby is not making antibodies for a period of time because it doesn't even start until later. And I say, well, then how's the baby protected? And the answer is because mother's milk contains the antibodies that the baby needs. So by using mother's milk, the infant is what is called passively immunized, meaning it's receiving the antibodies without making the antibodies, and therefore, it uses the mother's milk as its immunization mechanism. So,
and that's how it gathers information. That's how the system gathers the information that it needs, right?
Absolutely. And so the relevance is when we start vaccinating children at a very young age, we're bypassing the normal developmental system. We're overwhelming a mechanism that's evolving. The child's mechanism isn't fully developed. It's developing. And so for me, I'm not against vaccination if it's an oral vaccine. But I am against any vaccination that slips a poison into the system and the system not having any awareness of how that poison got there. That's it's like a flying saucer landing in your backyard. What the hell am I doing with this?
Right.
Where did that come from?
Where did it come from? We want to know. But so the question is, if
vaccines are good if they're oral, but when you start putting things under the skin, then there's problematic at that point. And then we start recognizing that they create these vaccines, and people don't recognize, because I'm old enough to remember something called the swine flu epidemic
Yes.
that happened in 1976. I go, what was the relevance? Well, what was the mission statement? And that brings me to today's problem as well, is the mission statement was to inject everyone in the country with a vaccine. That was the suggestion from the CDC, health people.
At the time.
And the idea about it is a mandatory vaccination. And thank God the boondoggles occurred, because by the time they were preparing this mandatory vaccination, people started to realize there was no swine flu epidemic. And unfortunately, school kids got the vaccine and elderly got the vaccine, but most of the population didn't take it. And yet we're cruising in today toward a solution of a mandatory vaccine.
Yes.
And,
that's what
scares the hell out of me
that's,
as a biologist. And
yes.
I teach immunology, so it's not like a different source of subject. I teach this course, and having that awareness is like the thought of being forcibly vaccinated is against human rights. That they can inject something and not tell you what's in that vaccine. That's the other little part of the story they don't want to tell you. The ingredients of the vaccines are not open to the public.
Right, and they're very, very hard to find. But this is my question, is that, as George Norrie was talking about the other night, you can't live under your bed the rest of your life. And then you have Fauci saying the minute we lift the ban, that we're going to see the cases go up. So you've got this situation where you can't live under the bed and you can't go outside. So the only solution that's going to be offered to us is this vaccine. And there go our human rights.
That is, as a biologist and a research scientist, that is my greatest fear of what this current situation could end up producing.
So what can we do?
Because let me just say, the vaccine that was the swine flu vaccine that was going to help everybody when there was no swine flu epidemic, those that got the vaccine, of course, there was no swine flu epidemic, but what they got from the vaccine is a normal disease that results from vaccines. It's called Guillain-Barré syndrome, and it's an interference with the immune functions. And it gets to be a nervous system disorder and all that. And so thousands and thousands of people that got the swine flu in 1976, the swine flu vaccine, they didn't have a swine flu. What they ended up with is getting Guillain-Barré, which was the consequence of getting the vaccine. And so right away it says, oh, wait a minute, even, this is, we're so cowed into being afraid that we would do things that if you stop long enough to think about it, you go, what am I doing?
Is there any more room in New Zealand? Because this is, I mean, is it going to happen there as well?
I have no idea. You see, unfortunately, I am really of the belief that different countries are going to take different attitudes. Like Sweden, it didn't lock itself down.
Right.
It doesn't have any more of an issue than any other country, and business is going on as usual.
They only lock down the immune-compromised and the elderly.
Mortality numbers, which are made-up numbers in the sense that they're not accurate, and they're fearsome, and they scare people. And then when people are afraid, this is another little interesting side effect. Remember I said when fear and stress hormones are released, I said there were two main things. I said, number one, the growth and maintenance of the body systems are shut down to conserve energy. Number two, the immune system is shut down to, again, save energy. And number three, which I didn't talk about, but it's really interesting, is that it stress hormones shut down consciousness and have us go into reactive subconscious behaviors, which are not thinking behaviors.
Herd mentality. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and the relevance about that is very simple. I mean, if you're running from a saber-toothed tiger, the last thing you need is to take your mind and start thinking about something that's not relevant to the saber-toothed tiger. And so the idea is the stress hormones, and again, this is a fact, the stress hormones, when I said they squeeze the blood vessels in the gut so that the blood will go to the periphery, I said that the stress hormones shut down the immune system function. But in the brain, and this is a fact, the stress hormones squeeze the blood vessels shut in the forebrain, which is conscious thinking and reasoning, basic thought. And when they squeeze the blood vessels in the forebrain, the reason they do that is because then the blood is pushed preferentially to the hindbrain, and that's reaction behavior. It's not thinking at all. And so I say, well, what's the consequence of the stress? Well, we talked about the physiological, the lack of growth, the shutdown of the immune system, and now let's add this: we are not conscious as much. We think less. We react without thinking. And when you scare enough people, you can get them to react to do things that if they were thinking, they would never do something like that. And it's real interesting. In the wake of 9/11, when everyone was in fear, they instituted what's called the Patriot Act. I go, what's the Patriot Act? Well, it has rules in there that violate our rights. In other words, they could pick somebody off the street, take them away for months, a couple of months, without even telling anybody where they are. Nobody can find them if they say they're a security risk. And I go, we lost freedom. And I'm saying, this is not a time to stop thinking. This is a time to say what's going on, because I hate to see from the CDC or some the medical people the equivalent of a Patriot Act that says you want to be a patriot, you have to have the vaccine.
Right.
To have it.
Well,
that would freak me out.
Let's talk about your book, Spontaneous Evolution, because it does address the consciousness of what we're going through right now and gives us kind
100%.
of a glimpse into
100%.
the future. Yes. How can...
Lisa, I hate to cut in because I get so excited.
Yeah, I know. I've interviewed you for decades. I get it. Yes, but we're having a tennis match here. Having a dialogue.
The global chaos that we're looking at, and it comes from every level. Right at this moment, we're talking global chaos in regard to a pandemic. But I say, look, global chaos in regard to religious strife, racial strife, economic upheaval, political, problems around the world simultaneously right now. And these are symptoms. And this virus, to me, is another one of the symptoms. And I say, symptoms of what? And I say, the problem. And I say, what's the problem? And the answer is this. We are on an imminent extinction track right now. And this is a fact of science again, it's called a mass extinction event. 5 times in the history of the planet, life was thriving, and then some event was catastrophic and wiped out up to 90% of life. 5 different times this happened. Wow. The last one was 66 million years ago when the dinosaurs were here and they had those lush jungles and tropics and all that. A comet hit near Mexico, a big comet, and it upended the web of life, wiped out, of course, all the dinosaurs and up to 90% of life. And I go, this is called a mass extinction. It's happened 5 times. And science has recognized, and I know in this, because I put it in my book, which is now 10 years old or more, then it was a scientific fact that we are facing the 6th mass extinction, that we're losing species of organisms faster on this planet than in previous mass extinctions. And then I say, yeah, but what's the cause? And here's what it is. Human behavior is destroying the environment which gave rise to us. And the relevance is you cannot live as a human if the environment is not underneath us, because we are the environment. So we are now losing species of organisms faster than ever. They took a survey. How many animals were on planet Earth? 1970, World Wildlife Foundation. 2 years ago, they repeated the survey, and they found that 2/3 of the animal population has disappeared. Since 1970, we only got 1/3 the number of animals on the planet. Up to 75% of the insects have disappeared in many places. And the fish, we've overfished, we've polluted the water, we're destroying breeding grounds. Now it's a fact of science, there won't be fish on this planet after 2048. And all these are science fiction-sounding realities, and yet, unfortunately, it's a real event. We are in a mass extinction. Human behavior has to change. And I say, well, why is it relevant? Because the way our cultures are built, the way our governments are running, are the cause of the problem. The way we live on the planet. I say, so what do we need to do? I say, well, we got to change. I say, well, can you build a new government on the foundation that we have? And I say, no. foundation is rotten. That's
Wow.
where the problem comes from. And so in the Spontaneous Evolution book, what it says is a necessary step for us to survive this imminent extinction, and I'm not talking 1,000 years, I'm talking within a century of this mass extinction event manifesting itself completely. And I go, so, it's very imminent in this, and I say, relevance is it's the way we have treated the planet, especially corporate entities which will, rape the planet as they've done and destroy the ecosystems. Either we stop and create a new way of life on this planet, or the end is looming right in front. It's not like maybe. We're in it already by the principles. Already we are in the sixth mass extinction. It is human behavior, and the relevance is simple. The culture and the government has to change. And it's interesting because since the last election, you could see the thing is in a crisis state. The government and everything is in this falling apart state, and part of it is their need to seem that they're in control, which is a problem, to resist this evolution, which really says we have to build a better way of life. We have to build a way a government responds better to the people and to the environment, and give people back the power, because the general population is at the whim of whatever corporate entities decide. And so when I look at what's going on, I say, the symptoms that we're seeing right now is changing the way of life. Absolutely.
Yes. Well, it's evidenced by these sea turtles. The sea turtles have 60 million sea turtles laid their eggs on the beaches because the humans weren't there. And think about that. These sea turtles are going to live for, 50 to 100 years. And that's amazing because the beaches are more empty, allowing nature to come back and do what they needed to do with the absence of the population, the human population. And it's fascinating.
In fact, that same story applies tenfold to the story of Chernobyl and Fukushima. Both of these were places with so much radioactivity, it was human exclusion. No humans can be here. And both of those sites now boast the richest wildlife and development of life than anywhere else in their nearby regions, because humans were excluded from going there. And what was the point? My God, when the humans are gone to place, it's going to grow back beautifully. And nature is a gardener. We're parasites. We're destroying the garden. So what is nature going to do? It gets rid of the parasites. It gets rid of the negative ones. And so all these symptoms that are showing up, especially this particular virus, or the way we're playing it out at this moment, are symptoms that says this is not operating correctly.
We have to take notice of this in a big way. So we're going to continue the conversation about spontaneous evolution when we come back. I am Lisa Garr. You're listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr. My guest is Dr. Bruce Lipton. I'm very proud to have Dr. Bruce with us tonight, talking about his second book, Spontaneous Evolution. And we've been talking about how this sixth mass extinction he wrote about 10 years ago in his book is looming. And in a way, one of the things that's come out of this whole pandemic as a benefit is the environment. It really has received a break, a much needed break, and pollution is down. Natural habitat is increasing because of, as you said, human exclusion. It allows nature to regrow. It allows animals to repopulate. And, you look at a bird and it doesn't know what COVID-19 is. It's doing its job. It's fascinating right now. So what was the result of your book, Bruce, when you were talking about this, heading towards something that could possibly be good?
Well, the idea is this, is that we're facing a breakdown of our conventional world system, which offers an opportunity that if it's broken down, if we build it, can we build it in a different way? I mean, here's an opportunity. Things are changing now. here now we can put a change into the system, and it's really required because the system itself has really it's not involving the people.
So broken.
The voice of the people are gone, and this is the scary part about the practice of the so-called lockdown that we're experiencing right now. Because what is the consequence of that? And the answer is it completely breaks up community, and when people are in community, then there's power for people. But if they're isolated and broken up, they become totally disempowered and at the whim of whatever controls are being put on them right now. And so the government is not blind to the fact that this evolution is going on. They're not blind to the fact that the economic world of paper money is somewhat of a giant pyramid scheme that's coming to an end. They've been very much aware that there's a possibility of things getting out of control. And so their movements are really efforts of how can they contain a population when it doesn't work anymore. And we're facing that right now. And to me, the scary side of this is, they're looking at ways to control the population right now. I said the flu is more aggressive than normal, but it's still under 1% mortality, and that's still at the far end of an extreme of normal.
But it never caused this level of population control. Never.
Yeah, and this is it's like a test system to me, and it's like, we're all isolated in our little rooms, and whatever they're doing is like, that's not for us to know. I get a little nervous about stuff like that because I know that the end is coming, and I know that they know that the end is coming.
What do you mean the end?
The end of the way of our economy, the way that we're, destroying the environment. They can't do this anymore. Corporations are going to have to change. And
right.
They're the last ones that want to do this change stuff. I mean, they've reduced all the, the restrictions on pollution in the last year because it boosts the economy. And it's like, it destroys the environment. And I say, well, who's looking after us? I say, not the corporations. And they know that, and it's coming. It's not sustainable. That's a simple fact, and it's known by people as sociologists and all that we are not in a sustainable situation at this moment. And either we learn something and do it in a different way, or continue on this track, and it's a very short track.
So
so I get nervous about the control issue,
now, in your opinion,
the fact
who is doing this control? In your opinion,
well, unfortunately, in my opinion, which is not based that I know all this stuff. Okay, so I'm going to emphasize my opinion. Is corporate government crossover. They're too connected with each other at this moment, and it's unfortunate because then I ask, is the government looking out for the rights of the people, or is the government looking out for the rights of the corporation? I go, well, just see how the bailout money is going and tell me which one.
It's been a month. Has anybody received any type of bailout money from the government at all? And that's
probably corporations at some level have,
yes.
And the fact is this. There is an evolution. We are in an evolution. And evolution means an upheaval. And so we are in an upheaval. And the idea is, what is the spontaneous evolution solution or conclusion of what would happen? The nature is all humans recognize we're one single community. All humans are part of the same community. And that it's really based on us, the cells. To really shape where we want to go and not leave it to a small number of people who have vested interests. That's basically what it comes down to.
It goes back to the very beginning of the show. We talked about cells being a community, and there are all interdependent, interconnected community of a cellular structure that makes it exist. One cannot exist without the other. It's just like a little village. And yes, there are leaders and there are followers, but you cannot have too much of a leader because it will destroy the community, right?
Well, if the leader isn't in harmony with the community,
right.
then the whole thing goes to hell. Unfortunately, we just have to look at the situation we have now and say, how's it working? I don't think so good. And it basically says, yeah, it's not even able to handle the problems that it has, and the government is always about control. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, things are getting out of control, and they want a tighter control of what's going on. That's just an inevitable part of the evolution, whether it was the coronavirus as a symptom, as one part of exercising this or not. It's really, the coronavirus to me is sort of like you're looking and seeing this tree, and there's a tree over there about, religious intolerance, and there's a tree over there with, racial problems and all that. And I say, those are the trees. If you stand back far enough, the trees make something bigger, the forest. And the forest, to me, is extinction. And all of the chaos at any level that you have seen is a reflection of the fact that we cannot sustain the way we've been living on this planet, because that is what is provoking the extinction. So it says change is coming. And I go, yeah, I know change is coming. We all know change is coming. But then those that are in control, the concept of change means, does that mean who's in control at some point? And the idea is they've always, is the idea of maintaining a control in a world where the control is the problem. What are we doing?
Right. It's fascinating because there are some systems that, first of all, I think that we have to be looking towards the new normals. And the longer we look at life to return back to the old normal, the more suffering that is going to cause. I think we need to break from that. And there's going to be enough time that we need to start to create the future of our own existence. And we can start in our own homes and our own communities. How do you want it to look? What is it going to look like when the isolation is lifted? How do we connect with each other in the future? I think definitely a lot more working from home, because it adds, it's less pollution. It's more connectivity to your family and your environment at home, and less travel, which would be great because it does keep the local businesses thriving as well if you stay closer to home in work and in travel. I do think that there are precautions that we can put into place and be a little bit more careful. I like that there's now plexiglass screens when you go to the market between you and the checker, and there's a lot more safety health precautions that are being put into place, which is great because we know germs are pervasive and these particular superbugs are very life-threatening. So we have the opportunity to put things into place now that can be very helpful, that we can respect this planet more, where we can reduce some of the pollution that we're putting into the planet. And I mean, even the idea of growing your own food and making sure that it's organic food that you're growing will help your immune systems. Find things that you can, different hacks that you can find out there. I found out about this, I don't know if you know about this LifeWave patch that stimulates the immune system that you can just put on your body. Have you ever heard of the LifeWave patch, the stem cell patch? There's so many things.
Yeah, a vibrational electromagnetic field thing, quantum stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's that's one of the interesting things, because our worldview is in a state of flux, and there's the science of quantum physics has been around since 1925 as an established field. And the significance is that most people have no concept in the world what the hell that means. Physics. We live in an older version of a universe. We live in a Newtonian version of a universe. I say, what is that? And I say, that's the vision that the universe in which we live is divided into a physical, mechanical part and an invisible part. And we've got one matter and the other energy, and there are two realms that are interacting to some degree. And we built a philosophy and a culture based on that belief. And then 1925, quantum physics said the realm of matter is an illusion. And now that sounds like matter doesn't exist, and the first thing's like, oh yeah, as you're sitting there, wherever you are, with all the matter surrounding you, and then quantum physics says it doesn't exist. Well, there's a true reason it doesn't exist, because this is an illusion of energy, and the relevance about that is, let's give a fact, which is like, this is the hard fact, and that is, quantum physics is the most valid science on the planet. There's no science with more truth than quantum physics. And as we mentioned, in quantum physics, consciousness is creating our life experiences. And then all of a sudden it says, well, if consciousness is created in our life experience, I would have created heaven on earth. I think that would have been more fun.
Yeah. Yes.
But what we also get to find out is that we are programmed. So the story of the Matrix is not science fiction. The story of Matrix is actually a documentary that all people are programmed, and it's a necessity of human development. You have to have programming, and then all of a sudden I say, but the character of your life is totally based on the character of your programming. And I go, so let's take one step back so it doesn't sound too science fiction here at the moment. And it goes like this: you go to a computer store and you buy a brand new computer and you take it home and you push the button and it opens up, it starts up, okay, it boots up, so to speak. And I say, okay, I got a brand new computer. I push on, it boots up. Now I say do something, like draw or word spreadsheet or whatever. I say, oh, no, I have to have a program. The computer itself needs a program. Otherwise, the computer's useless.
To run.
So in the development of a human, in the last trimester of development, the brain is online, and in other words, it's booted up.
Okay.
But it has no programs. And so from the last trimester of pregnancy through age 7, a child's brain is not predominantly functioning at conscious level. It's functioning at a lower vibration, and now, not to be new age, that means you just put wires on a person's head, electroencephalographs. You can read brain vibrations, and there are different ranges of vibration with different characteristics. And consciousness begins at alpha and then goes to beta, which is a focused consciousness. This is a higher vibration. A lower vibration is called theta. And that's the state that a child is in. The brain is in theta essentially during that programmable period through age 7. And I say, so what is that? And then I can say, characteristically, theta is imagination in its operation. And I say, yeah, children will have a tea party and they'll pour nothing into the cup and drink the nothing and how wonderful the tea was, or ride the broom and it's a horse. This is a character of theta. But theta is hypnosis. And I say, why should 7 years of a child, the first 7 years, be in hypnosis? And the answer is, that's where the programming occurs. The programming of what? Well, how to be a member of the family, how to be a member of the community.
It's automatically downloaded. That program's automatically there.
But so we get programming. I mean, you got to be a member of a family and community. I say, how many rules are required to do that? And you start to think, my God, 100,000 rules. I mean, just simply how a father talks to his own child is not how the father talks to the neighbor's child. It's not how the father talks to the mother. It's not how the father talks to the neighbor. It's not how the father talks to the policeman. All of a sudden you realize every one of those is part of a program. And you start to realize the massive number. I say, yeah, but a child has to learn this. I say, how does a child learn it? You can't give them a book. I go, no, they're in hypnosis. They just observe it. And they download what they experience. If you're a girl, generally, in the download, you download your mother's behavior, your father's behavior, your siblings' behavior. So when you download your mother's behavior, that's the one that those are generally the programs that you're going to follow. But when it comes to your father, then it's sort of like, well, that's how fathers behave. So guess what? At a point when you're going to look for a mate, you're going to look for some characteristics that are connected to that. That's programming. And the issue of this programming is what shapes 95% of our life. We have a creative conscious mind which makes wishes and desires and manifests them. We can manifest heaven on earth, and that's what the honeymoon is all about. And I go, we can manifest these things when we're conscious, but the neuroscience reveals that only 5% of the time are we using the creative conscious mind. 95% of our life is controlled by the programs in the subconscious mind.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden I say, oh my God, well, where do we get these programs from? Well, we get programs from just observing the family, but, the health program that, really I talk about it in the immunology program is when you're a child in the average family, if something's wrong with the health, we say, we go to the doctor. When mommy's sick, she goes to the doctor.
That's more programming. That's more programming.
Say,
yes.
So what's the program? What is the program of that experience?
Go to the doctor.
Program is that I'm not in charge of my health, that the doctor is the truth provider for me about health because I am not the professional. And I go, so why is that relevant? And I say, because at that moment you gave up control of your health. And you are now programmed to accept whatever the doctor says is truth.
Well, let's put this in a giant social context, though, Bruce, and say how much have we bought into the programming of what is the societal norm of destroying the planet, of pollution, of overrunning economies, and so forth. There was this great piece that Irvin Laszlo wrote called "The Pandemic as Opportunity," and he was talking about this disruption, this major disruption that this pandemic is causing. And it will prevent us, and it can hopefully prevent us from going and buying back into that programming of what is normal punishment of the earth.
That's exactly right. And this is what we've been talking about, that the way we have been programmed is not only destructive to ourselves because we're programmed to feel like we're frail, vulnerable humans open to coronavirus.
Or not enough, and we have to over-purchase and overbuy in order to be enough. And overdo. Yeah.
This is, and so this is this opportunity again. Why is what's going on here? I say, well, the fear is causing a shutdown, which for a moment, and you're absolutely right about the tranquility found in the environment when everybody's isolated or,
there is a piece to it.
My friends in Sacramento, California said they've never in 30 years seen the air this clear.
I mean, and never in this long have you not heard. I mean, I think we could possibly be in the midst of world peace. I'm not hearing the reports of the fighting in the Gaza Strip. It might be happening. I don't know. But this is the least amount that we've ever heard of war-torn areas. And maybe it's because we're not hearing about it, or is it maybe because this virus took it all down and disrupted that too? It's fascinating what we're going through, and we are at a choice point, like you said, where we can make decisions right now of how we want it to look, what program do we want to run post-virus. So we will come back, continue this stimulating conversation with Dr. Bruce Lipton, and we will be taking your calls after the bottom of the hour as well. So we want to get you guys, your voices heard as well. So stick with us. I am Lisa Garr. You're listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr, and we're going to be back with Dr. Bruce Lipton after this break. I just want to mention that if you would like a great 10-part series that I just produced that is all about health and solutions and possibilities, and it's very grounded. I've got David Wolf on there talking about very interesting immune system hacks. Udo Erasmus talking about his Udo's oil that he's had immune building for 35 plus years. CBD, how to pivot in business. A beautiful piece from Derek Rydell talking about how to really go to a place of reverence. Lynn McTaggart's talking about power of intention. A lot of great people. Very special interview. Dr. DiMartini talking about how to comebacks in business. And then, of course, Dane here talking about how to live from a place of possibilities. Just really wonderful series. If you go to theawareshow.com/health now, that's theawareshow.com/health now. You can access that series there with lots of bonuses and great content for you to just consume in this time where we don't want to go to a fear place. We want to go to a place that has solutions, possibilities, and a place for you to go forward in your thinking. So check that out. I will be right back with Dr. Bruce Lipton to talk more about spontaneous evolution. You're listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr. My guest is cellular biologist Dr. Bruce Lipton, and we're having such a fun time with this conversation, going back and forth on basically that's the cellular biology of positive thought. It's really what this boils down to. We've been talking about the spontaneous evolution and the fact that we are not going to be returning to our old normal if we can begin to create. We're at a choice point, really, through this disruption of this pandemic. We're at a choice point of where what do we want the program to be now? How do we want it to run? And so I had a great question come in from a listener who typed into me, what is the, if we gain all of our programming from our family interaction and our peers and experts and doctors and so forth when we grow up, what would be the other option? So we're born with everything that we need to know, or do we learn through trial and error? What would be the alternative to that, Bruce, if we didn't learn from our educators and our doctors and our families and our friends?
Well, the first thing, basically, we learn from our experiences. Now, the question is, that's where the programming comes in. What are your experiences that you're going to deal with? And we have to have something like that, only basically because you cannot genetically program life. Life changes based on environment, time, history, everything that's going on. So there's no way to program that into the system because it's based on a culture which is evolving all the time. So by definition, it's based on a learning experiences. Programming occurs, learning how to walk is a program. Think about it. Yeah, how'd you do it? From experience.
Right.
I go, when did you learn? Before you were 2. I say, you could be 100 years old and you're still walking. I go, great program. That's what the nature of, there are really good programs, but there are unfortunately programs that when we download them, it disempowers as well. And it's been suggested up to 70% of the programs that we did get are limiting and disempowering or self-sabotaging beliefs. Just the way we were treated, the way we watched other people get treated. We live in this world. You have to be part of this world, and we have to have that programming only because the computer needs a program so that it can make sense out of what we experience. And then it turns out, most importantly, then the control, what's the mind's job. And if we get this sentence, and this all of a sudden is serious, it says, the function of the mind is to create coherence between your beliefs and your reality. If you have positive beliefs, then you end up creating a positive reality. You have negative beliefs, you end up creating one you don't want. And these beliefs come in unconsciously, and that's the biggest part because they came in, consciousness didn't develop really until after, by age 7. That's when it's starting to kick in. So whatever went into the program, the most important aspect is this: we were not there to filter it. There was no consciousness to say, oh, that's a good program, that's a bad program. There's no consciousness. It was just downloading programs. Now, the important thing is, so now we are indeed, everyone got programmed because it's the only way you can get going. And it's not that it's a classroom programming, it's a life experience programming. That's what it's all about. And I say, so the significance is now that we've been programmed, the issue is, what are my programs? Think about it that way.
Which ones do we want to keep? And which ones do we want to not keep, right?
Yeah. How do you know what your programs are? Because they were downloaded before you were aware. And I so I said, what did you learn when you were 1? It was like, I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
0. What did you learn at 0? Even less than I knew at 1.
Well, yeah, that fire is hot and crawl, yes. And sharp things hurt, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's it. That you build them up, program by program, experience by experience, and then by 7 you got these downloads. And the issue is these are the programs. And I say, well, what is my programming? And then here's the fun part, because I can answer that question for you by this simple understanding. Neuroscience has recognized that 95% of our life is actually run directly from the programs. And I say, so relevance is very simple. Your life is essentially a printout of your programs. I go, what do I mean? I go, look at your life, and here's the basic thing. The things that you like that come into your life come in because generally you have programs to acknowledge that. But the things that you work hard on, things that you struggle to get, I'm putting a lot of effort into this. I'm sweating over. I'm going to make this happen.
Yeah.
And I go, this is the point. I say, so first question is, why are you working so hard? And the answer inevitably is whatever that destination is, whether it's health, relationship, job, I don't care what the destination is, whatever you struggle to get to, inevitably the downloaded program that came before your consciousness didn't support that destination. And so your efforts are what? Trying to override programs.
Right.
And
Right.
consciousness working 5% with a smaller processor has a very difficult time in overriding those programs.
So if you're born in a certain economic environment and you want to break out of that, you have to try even harder to break through the programming that tells you need to stay in that bracket.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean you'll make it either. You see,
Right.
Lots of people work hard like crazy, but they never get there.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
It's interesting. This is Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's exactly what we're talking about. What he said is if you grew up in an impoverished family, the lifestyle and the programming and the way people behave in that is a program, okay? If you grew up in a rich family, you got a completely different program about how life works and all that. And I say, so what's the difference? And as his book goes on to say, if you grew up in a poor family, the chances are inevitably you're going to end up with the same struggles your family had. And if you grew up in a rich family, you'll succeed, because it's an unconscious programming that's what rich families have versus poor families. It's a different way of looking at life. So what did Kiyosaki's book say? It was the developmental programming that determined the outcome of the life. And then it's interesting because it's like, okay, so what are we saying? We're saying that the programming that we get in the first 7 years is the programming that determines the character of our lives. And I go, yes. And then I go, for 400 years, the Jesuits have told people, give me a child until it is 7 and I will show you the man. It's like, that they were telling people for 400 years, if I get the first 7 years of programming, I determine the outcome of that individual's life.
So you're saying that we can choose our programs, or we can choose maybe mentors that, so say, for example, the example of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that he found mentors outside of his economic situation that helped him grow and stimulated his growth. Many people have that.
If you understand that, you need to do programming, because the rest of them is just say, if I work harder, they're not looking at programming. They're just looking at effort. If I work harder, I'll get to the same conclusion. I go, no, that doesn't necessarily get you there. It just makes you work hard. But the one who went and got the tutor, the one who had somebody, to help, was saying, what? I need to learn something different. The other one just says, I'll just keep going. Here's the problem. We've been on several programs together in history, and I think I probably said the same story each time, but it's the same story I've used for 30 years because it is the profound story, and it's this. Probably during your period of growing up and wherever you are, you had a friend, and you were very close to your friend, and you knew your friend's behavior very well. And in this particular case, you knew your friend's parent. And then one day you see your friend has the same behavior as their parent. So, of course, this excites you, and you have to tell your friend, you go, hey, Bill, you're just like your dad.
Right.
And I say, back away from Bill. Bill's the first thing is going to go ballistic. How the hell can you compare me to my dad? I'm nothing like my dad. And everyone laughs. They're familiar with it. And I go, if there's a profound story to be told, this is it. I say, what does it mean? Bill behaves like his dad. Everybody can see it, except Bill. And the reason why he can't see it is because we never said, how come 95% of our life is coming from these programs? And the answer is this. When we're not thinking, we're creating life. But the moment we're thinking, our attention is not looking forward, but it's looking inside. Answers of thoughts are not in the outside world, they're in the inside world. So when we are thinking, consciousness is directed inward. I say, Lisa, tell me what you're doing on Monday. And it's not written in front of you, but you can come up with an answer. I say, where'd you find the answer? It's in my head. So I go, thinking redirects conscious attention. So basically look at it this way. Your body's a vehicle, and the mind is driving. It's got its hands on the wheel. I say, well, wait, there's the conscious mind. I say, where's it going? Conscious mind is creative. It goes toward wishes and desires. And I say, fine. But then I say 95% of the day that conscious mind is thinking, it lets go of the wheel. I say, yeah, but then who's driving the vehicle? I go, the subconscious is autopilot. So when consciousness is not paying attention, the subconscious plays its programs, and these are the programs that we grew up with, how to walk, how to talk, how to drive a car, how to play an instrument. And so what's the point? And the point is this, is that 5% of the time we are driving our vehicle into the future with wishes and desires with conscious mind at the wheel. But 95% of the time, conscious mind is thinking, therefore, let's go the wheel. Subconscious kicks in, plays the program. Conscious is not watching, because where's conscious? It's looking for some thought going on. And I say, so this is the story of Bill. Why did Bill play his father's behavior? And the answer is he was programmed with his father's behavior. I say, yeah, but how come he doesn't see it when he's playing it? And I say, he only plays it when he's thinking 95% of the day. And all of a sudden it says that 95% of his life is coming from the program. I go, yeah, and that's why your life is a printout of these programs. And then, and I love it because the third book that came out of the trilogy here is called The Honeymoon Effect. And the honeymoon effect is a beautiful example of what I'm talking about. It basically says this: your life could be every day, blah, 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 blah. And then you meet someone. I mean, it just blows your mind.
Right.
You fall head over heels in love. And I say 24 hours later, you're saying, man, life is beautiful.
Right, exactly.
Life is
and you're no longer running from the program. It's something new.
That's the first time you stop thinking. This is what science has recognized. I'm not making this stuff up. Science has recognized that when people are in love like that, they stay present in the present moment. They stop thinking. They're being right there. And the thing is obvious. If you've been looking for this person your whole life and they show up, this isn't the time to think. This is the time to be present. And
right.
so it turns out, by staying present, you keep your hands on the wheel. I say, what does that mean? I say, you're driving toward your wishes and your desires when you stay in the present mind. And that's how all of a sudden the blah, blah, blah world in 24 hours, because now consciousness holds onto that wheel, doesn't let go, and it's driving toward what? Heaven on earth. And sure enough, that's what manifests.
Well, that's what we would like to manifest. You know, you remind me of teenagers. The teenagers have this thing where they're defiant, and they have all of this defiance that comes up after adolescence, and that's their attempt to go inward to come up with their own conclusions, and it looks like they're defying the normal pattern that they were raised with, but it's actually an attempt to define their own character. And they get misunderstood so often, and it causes a lot of discontent. But that's, it's interesting. Yeah, exactly.
Least discontent.
So we have this opportunity now that we have been, we can really choose to have our own thoughts amidst all that we're being told. And yes, it is important to stay safe, and yes, it is important to flatten the curve, and staying inside is helping with that. But after this, and when we get to a place where the isolation is lifted, what do our choices want to be after this? And I do think that there is an after this, that there's going to be a point, if we can actually get the curve flattened and decrease, that we have a choice point. And we're in that place right now of, do we want to go back to the old programs? Or do we want to go back, or do we want to choose something new? What program do we want to choose? We are in a profound place right now of creation. And as we see nature do all the time, it creates, it destroys. It creates, it destroys. So we have this opportunity to create a new normal for ourselves. And you start with yourself. You're not going to change the world right now, but I think you kind of need to start just internally and ask questions, to start to ask questions.
That reminds me of the old phrase, being old enough to remember in the hippie days. It was, take care of your backyard before you go out and save the world. And this is really what we have to do. We have to realize, how have we been behaving? What is it that this shutdown, so to speak, is giving us thought about? And one of the interesting things is local community. That becomes important at a time like this.
Yeah.
And the seeds of local community grow to larger and larger and larger communities, and that is what evolution is, the evolution of community, to recognize there are not separate communities ultimately. Ultimately, there's one community of mankind, and that that this is how 50 trillion cells. Each cell is the equivalent of a miniature human in its function. I say, in a healthy body, that's 50 trillion happy citizens at the very same time.
Well, if they all work together, that equals health. right?
That's exactly what it's about. And not all the cells are the same, so it's not like, the fear of there's one government, we all become the same. I say, look, the liver doesn't look anything like the stomach, which doesn't look anything like the brain. Those are like different countries, so to speak. And so it's not uniformity. It's basically, the function is coordination. And this is what, it's a government of coordination, not a government of control. A government of coordination to make sure everybody's working in harmony. The brain, if you want to make an analogy that's really close, is like the conductor of an orchestra. I said, what does it mean? I said, well, all the instruments in each section, whether it's the brass, the woodwinds, or percussion, I say, each of them knows how to play the music. The brain, the conductor doesn't tell them how to play the music. The doctor just coordinates how they work together. And so the idea of a government that tells us how to do things versus a government that tells us how to work together or shows us how to work together, that's the difference. And the scary part is, like, people think, well, a global government is like the evil side. I said, well, if they're going to tell you what to do, that might be evil, but if they help coordinate the function, that's the positive side. And that's what we have to do. And the world is simultaneously shut down. Very interesting.
It is fascinating. We've never seen this before. And I'm curious to know, and we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back from the break, we're going to start taking phone calls. And I'd love it if you could add in whatever your question is. Great, and ask the question, Bruce, and so forth. But maybe we could just start to think about what types of things we took for granted before this shutdown that we appreciate more now than ever. And I would love to just have you add that in at the end of all of your questions, because I think it would be interesting to know what we did take for granted that we appreciate now more than ever. I'd love to know that nationwide. So we are, Bruce, going to take a break, and then when we come back, we're going with questions here. Are you good with that?
I am looking forward to that. Thank you so much. As I said, this is our world. This is our community of people out there, and that community is our destination.
That is awesome. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. All right, we will be right back, and I thank you so much for this. It's just been a really super fun conversation. All right, I am Lisa Garr, and you are listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr, and I have a wonderful guest with me, Dr. Bruce Lipton, and we're talking about such great things here, and you've got great questions coming in. I am really excited to go to our callers. Are you ready, Bruce? Making sure you're good.
In the wheel.
All right, good. All right, so we've got Michael in Virginia Beach calling in. Hey, Michael, how are you? Go, Michael.
Oh, hi, Lisa. So good to talk to you.
You too.
How's your mom?
Aw, you're so sweet for asking. She's good, thank you. She's listening. She's actually been texting me throughout the show.
Oh, that's well, she's everybody's sweetheart. She always will be.
You're such a love. Thank you so much. What is your question for Bruce?
Yes, Dr. Lipton, I think we should let Las Vegas die, not bail Las Vegas out after this. I think we should let all the tourism industries die, not bail them out, not let the government money go to these touring ships and luxury liners, that kind of thing. I think all of these things are a fulfillment of the angel's warning to Daniel. Many will run to and fro. I think he understood what the natural immunity of communities is all about and why we have to protect those natural immunities and not put them under undue stress with people coming in for no good reason from all over the world, bringing their own peculiar, hideous pandemics with them. I think the way to stop it is to say to our government, every coast-to-coast member should write or speak to or send an email to his congressman or senator and say, look, don't bail out anything that has to do with recreation. Don't. It is not vital. It is not vital to our survival. You are destroying our vital industries by this stupid use of our money.
Let me ask, Michael, let me ask Dr. Lipton here. Does tourism put a strain on immunity when we have people coming from outside? Does it?
The only strain that's on our immunity basically is our own failure to support our own immune system. We've been given a most fabulous immune system that protects people. Think about it this way. Doctors for years have walked through all the wards with all the sickest people, with all the different diseases, and they walk out without the disease.
Right.
And the issue is, what is there? Are they genetically different? The answer is no. Their consciousness doesn't really support getting sick. They can't get sick in their mind because their job is to help people. So this is a real important insight as to the mind's job. Now, of course, if you break the programming in that, then the whole thing falls apart. Should I be afraid of other people? Well, I'm personally no, and because my immune system I feel is really pretty good. I'm an old guy, and I'm a healthy old guy, and I feel I'm healthy because hey, when I grew up, that was the days, very interesting, when kids were allowed to go play in the dirt and
right.
mess themselves up and everything. And it turns out that the healthiest people today, and see, our own kids are compromised in their health because it's something called the hygiene hypothesis. If you keep it too clean, you're defeating the development of this immune system, which for the first 12 years is in high gear. And if you keep it too clean, you're not giving the system an opportunity to create its learning and memory of environment. It turns out, it's interesting that the healthiest of all kids are kids that have pets. And this is part of the immune science, and the reason is very simply this. While you can sterilize everything frequently, people don't sterilize their pets.
Right.
And their pets are actually, vaccinating the kids,
right?
With stuff that they carry,
bringing all that dander in, and it creates a immunity, and that's really what we're looking for here is this immune science. We actually have to take another quick break. I'll be right back, Dr. Bruce Lipton on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I'm Lisa Garr. My guest is Dr. Bruce Lipton, and let's go back to our phone lines here. We've got Nancy east of the Rockies. Hi, Nancy. What is your question for?
Very much. I would like to be returned to the woman I talked to at the end.
Yes.
Questions. My questions for
guest. Yeah, for Dr. Bruce Lipton.
Yes.
Yes.
Has to do with thyroid.
Great question.
Bad water that is killing us. What they put in the water, the fluoride. And is not cortisol the measuring factor of
the stress hormone?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then also people do not have and are afraid of doctors right now. I need one desperately. I've needed one. I've been trying to get one since last June. My community is failing me. Everyone is failing me. I'm 69 years old, and they beat down my door in December. I've come to find out that 6 blocks from me, they broke down her door. And they illegally searched and seized her home, where they just broke down my door and said it was for safety. What about my safety? I'm a PhD person. I've had a horrendous childhood. I've had a horrendous life, been denied my rights, and what happened to liberty. But
let's actually talk about the stress hormone. Let's talk about that for a second, because it could be really helpful for you to understand what that means. So if you don't mind, Dr. Bruce, could you talk about the effects of the stress hormone and cortisol on the body and how it could help by really going inside to maybe yourself?
Well, yeah, I mean, basically, stress was designed for immediate function, like being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. So the stress functions were only like shutting or redirecting the body's energy for a very short time. That was your original design. You run away from the tiger, the stress is over, you go back to life again. But as we've been talking about, the stresses today are 24/7, 365. A human body was never designed for prolonged stress. That's chronic stress. That's where 90% of illness on this planet comes from, whether it's cardiovascular disease and cancer. People think genes cause cancer, and it's like, no, primarily stress is causing cancer. There is no gene that causes cancer, in fact. And the relevance about this is that we're living out of balance. And this balance has a physiological consequence of self-destruction. And this is what we're seeing right now because cortisol inhibits our growth, inhibits our immune system, inhibits our intelligence, and that's a downhill run. And we're on that right now. And it's being propagated like crazy over the media. Fear of death is like the greatest fear of all. and if that's what you're, pushing, you're going to die. Of course, that's injecting fear and exacerbating every problem we have. It's just even that media about the fear.
So it would be good to just calm that down and to go into something that, as I mentioned earlier, find out something that you took for granted before that you really appreciate now. And that might help you, maybe even make a list of that, to find the things that you appreciate, and it will help you choose thoughtfully, intentionally, what you want to go back to doing.
Norman Cousins, everybody's familiar with his book. He laughed himself to wellness, and he had a disease that was presumably incurable. And after getting that diagnosis, he just went locked himself in a hotel and just watched funny movies. And at some point, he came out of that whole situation with the incurable disease being cured. And what was it? It was being in joy. It was laughing because the chemistry of a body that's in happiness has wonderful chemicals in it that take care of the system. One of the most important chemicals released in a happy experience is called growth hormone. And that does exactly what the name says. And it's interesting because that's fundamental. Just for example, when people are in love, there's a burst of growth hormone. And it's interesting because people, when they look at sometimes at couples that are in love like that, they go, look, see how they glow, see how healthy they are. I go, this is not a coincidence or chance. It's a consequence of focusing that belief on something positive. Because the chemistry of a positive picture is positive to our health. And the chemistry of a scary picture, as we talked about, the whole sequence of stress hormones and what are called cytokines that control the immune system, all of that will take away health. Because it wasn't designed to be prolonged. It was only run away from that damn tiger and then get back to having a good life again. And we never get to get back.
Right. We're just in a constant...
being chased by the tiger 24/7, 365.
Constant state of stress. Yes, especially it is so heightened now. To the fact that when people, if you happen to walk by anyone who's on the opposite side of the street, they look down as if saying hi from across the street could infect them. And I see it all day, and it blows my mind. But it's okay to wave to someone across the street, like down the block. I think it's okay. Anyway, I don't want to...
What are we afraid of? That's the whole question. What are we afraid of?
What is
it, death? And then I go, let's be realistic. We're not going to die like crazy people with this thing. The same cohort of people are the same ones that are really going to be affected, just more of that same group, more of the aged, those in nursing homes, and those with compromised systems. That's called a cohort. Those people with those characteristics, more of them will die with this flu than in a previous year, but not the population is young people and all that stuff. I saw one headline, a baby died from coronavirus. That's what they said, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is this, is like, a baby, what are the other things that were involved with that baby? Nobody talks about all these extenuating circumstances, but the last thing that happened was virus, and then he died of the virus, and it's like, and then they make this like big story. I say, one person, okay, it's the world is not this one person, but that was necessary to write, because as soon as that happened, it's like, oh my God, children are going to die from this. It's like one. died.
Right.
And we don't know the circumstances, but the fear, especially in parents, is like, oh my God, the children. And then, then we're running on fear again.
Yeah.
The tiger never stops chasing you.
It's an interesting way to think about this. Let's go to Mickey in Queens, New York. Hi, Mickey. How's it going tonight?
Oh, hi. It's a pleasure to hear you. First time I hear your voice. I hear you hosting the program.
Well, good.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Do you have a question for Bruce Lipton? Something he can help you with?
Yeah, for Dr. Lipton, I would like to, I have heard so many times that it's too late to reverse the damage of the planet. But I also wanted to let him know that I'm using optimized quercetin. It's a food-based bioflavonoid, and I'm getting counsel from Dr. Ronald B. Keys. He's a PhD. He sounds like he could be a good friend of Dr. Keys. And I have his number here, 954.
Oh, wait, we don't want to give numbers on the air. We can't do that for people's privacy, but that is a good suggestion. I don't think it's too late for our environment. What do you think, Dr. Lipton?
Oh my goodness, the environment that's what we talked about. If humans just stop treading on it so heavily, it comes back in the shortest of time. I mean, here where we are in New Zealand, there was an area that was overfished, and the government said, okay, that's it, no fishing in this massive zone of the sea. And 5 years, the fish level population in that area is back to what it was before people were here in New Zealand.
Wow.
As soon as they stopped, it all came back. And Chernobyl, as we talked about, turned into this wildlife sanctuary right now, and even around Fukushima. So all of these things. And here's an interesting fact that volcanic islands were created when volcanoes go off, and then the lava goes out in the sea, and they have these islands. And these islands, they start out as nothing but lava, but within 10 years, these islands are covered with bushes and trees and vegetation, and it's like it was just like nature will fill that space and fill it with beautiful nature when given the opportunity. If we step back and we stop the pollution of the planet, which is the real freaky part, when corporations override the environmental protection that we need, and allow the pollution, that is what is hindering the return of the planet. We really need very strict environmental understanding because we cannot live without an ecosystem. It doesn't work. And we are an extension of the ecosystem by evolution. So the point is, if you chop out the bottom, the top will collapse, and
it is fascinating.
Mass extinction.
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating. I'm sorry, what was that last piece you said?
And that's why we're facing a mass extinction.
We don't have to.
We haven't paid attention to what are we doing to our Mother Earth, period.
Well, think about a lot of the corporations are shut down, so they're not toxic dumping, and a lot of that waste is not being put into the environment right now, yet there are still the same amount of people working, if they're working from home, say, for example, in the world. So if you have the same amount of people that are still able to get work done, maybe from home, and you don't have the toxic dumping, then we could actually reverse the situation and do less work in these major polluting environments and stay in our own homes where we're not going to necessarily want to do that. We really aren't going to want to pollute our own backyards and families, and things could really take a turn just by that simple effort of working from home half the time than going into a corporation.
I mean, just in the traffic, the amount of traffic that is continuous and belching all that toxic fumes. I mean, the simple point, you can't breathe what comes out of the exhaust pipe. That'll kill you. Yeah. And it's like, and look at all the exhaust pipes. It's like, holy jeez.
I think we should be taking more classes on home gardening. These are things that you can watch and you can, try to listen to online, is how to do your own yard work and how to home garden. And there's different things. I mean, the easiest things to possibly to grow are things like basil and mint. And then you can, after the herbs, you can start with little like tomatoes, zucchini. It's fun. It's fun if you don't start with the avocado tree. I mean, I tried that and it died really fast. So
well, that's great because gardening puts your hands back into the earth,
right,
and that connects us. It's called grounding, actually, and it's very important to be in that connection with the planet. This is how we evolved, and the more of our human evolution is, the more of a disconnection from what we evolved from, and the reality is that's artificial. You can't do that. We can't disconnect from the environment. We are. So if we don't learn the harmony, and this is what the planet is saying, listen, you've got to learn this now. There's a short time left. And if you learn it, it's going to be really great because you're going to return to a garden. That's what the whole idea was.
Imagine
we
if,
from
yes.
a garden,
yeah.
we can go back to the garden.
And even if you live in an apartment with a balcony, you can turn the balcony into a garden with planter boxes.
Absolutely.
And you won't have the rodent problem.
The movement of growing food in the city is an important future for us, mainly because of climate change. And that's a big topic on its own because that's another part of the required evolution. We're dealing with climate change, and yes, I know people talk about rising water in the cities on the coast and all that, and I go, that is a problem. But you just were talking about the most major problem, and that is this: how can you have agriculture if you can't tell what the weather's going to be?
Right.
And that's where the problem comes from.
Oh, my goodness. I have to say thank you. You have been awesome and amazing, and I don't want to let you go, but I've got to get to open lines. So thank you, Dr. Bruce Lipton. You are amazing. His website is drbrucelipton.com, and books are The Biology of Belief and Spontaneous Evolution, and it has just been an awesome pleasure. Thank you, Bruce. So amazing. Yes, you can go to brucelipton.com. Sorry, not with the DR, but brucelipton.com, and you can check out all his information there. I am Lisa Garr. We will be right back. You're listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr. Happy to talk with you on Open Lines tonight. Let's go to John, east of the Rockies. Hey, John, how's it going in Tennessee?
Doing great. How you doing?
Excellent. Thank you. What's going on?
Super excited to get through to you. I wanted to share this. I think it could heal our country and heal the world, and it's free medicine, and it's everywhere. It grows everywhere in this country and everywhere around the world. It's turkey tail mushroom.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I've heard about that.
There's a guy, Paul Stamets,
yes,
did a TED Talk, and he wrote a book all about the mushrooms, and there's so many different valuable things about them. But this one in particular is like antiviral, that it has medicinal properties that will cure cancer, tumors, and tuberculosis, and it'll cure hepatitis C. I mean, the properties in this turkey tail mushroom is absolutely amazing, and I just wanted to share it.
Yes.
If we could get everybody, the Coast to Coast listeners, to tell everybody they know, you make a cup of tea out of it, or you can make a gallon of tea, and if you drink a cup a day, it's supposed to reduce tumors 85% within 10 days of just drinking a cup a day.
That is a great idea. I have interviewed Paul Stamets, the fun guy. He is He is brilliant. I learned so much from him about how mushroom mycelium creates the networking underneath the forest floor that creates our eco-environment. I mean, it really is the mushrooms that are the foundation of our earth. And the turkey tail has incredible medicinal properties. Check it out.
Yeah.
You can look it up online. Amazing for immune system as well.
Yeah, and it's so easy. It grows everywhere. It's easily identifiable. It has the polypores on the bottom, which are the little tiny holes.
Do you hunt for them yourself?
Yeah, I've already been hunting them and gathering them and making tea out of it. And
awesome.
I've been drinking the tea, and my wife has been drinking it. We've been feeding it to the kids. We gave it to a friend of ours who has asthma really bad, and he said when he first drank it that very first time that he could actually breathe
Wow.
that night. And he's been drinking it ever since, and that was a few weeks ago.
Tell me, how do you tell
So,
the difference? Is it more colorful, or is there something on the bottom of it? How do you tell what it
well,
looks like?
the turkey tail, it looks like turkey feathers. It's like in the shape of a turkey feather. The individual mushroom looks like a turkey tail itself, but then when they grow together in the groups, it also looks like the plumage of the turkey tail. So, but just imagine that, different colors, but the polypores is the way to tell, because there is a false turkey tail, but the false turkey tail is kind of really dry and brittle, and it doesn't have the polypores on the bottom of it. So that's the best way to tell the difference as far as I know, but you can Google the information very easily, and it will tell you how to identify it. And then I don't think there's any harm in getting the wrong one. It just doesn't have the medicinal properties of the actual turkey tail.
Right.
So it's not like one of those mushrooms where you got to be scared about going and picking and, getting poisoned or whatever.
That's good to know. That's really good to know. Yeah, you can look them up online. They look beautiful. I did just interview David Wolf also about, he does the same thing where he does mushroom hunting, and he's got a farm in Canada, and he's also got a line of them. So they're a great, thank you so much for that reminder, and have fun mushroom hunting. It's awesome.
I will, yeah. If I was thinking if we could just fight fire with this virus, if we can just spread the word about the turkey tail, tell everybody and tell them to tell everybody. Let's nick this thing in the bud and start drinking some turkey tail, because it will be a cure. And it's just, we just have to get, knowledge is power, and let's get the knowledge of that turkey tail out there and get people making this tea and drinking it, and let's heal some of these people.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Yeah. And you know what? I wanted to ask you, because I want to ask a lot of my callers tonight, what have you found that you were taking for granted before that you're grateful for now?
I guess it's just my kids.
Yeah.
You really appreciate the closest of your family and the love of humanity. If we could expand that love of our family and our close people and give that same unconditional love to the whole world, then we'd be all, giving each other what we need as humans. We're all in this together. We're all one energy, and we do have to all give unconditional love to everybody. So, let's all, this is a good opportunity for the world to come together and realize, we all got to help each other.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you, Lisa.
Have a great night. I love the Coast community. We are totally connected. Let's just, and if anyone, think of that. Think about what you maybe took for granted before that you are so grateful for now. And our whole interview was talking about us being at a choice point, and we really get to choose the things that we bring back into our life, and rather than mindlessly or unconsciously buying things from patterns. So just really think about that. I want to ask you, as you're asking your other questions as well, let's go to Bruce in Woodland Hills. Bruce, how's it going tonight?
Lisa, thank you for taking my call. I'm very impressed with your speaker there, Dr. Lipton. He brought some great points. I want to kind of elaborate on that and also kind of have some solutions of what I think are some of the roots of a lot of the problems. I want to focus on health, but the first thing I'm going to say really applies to a lot of things happening to our environment and our biosphere. The first problem, and I think one of the biggest problems we have in the world, is money in politics. Because what's happening is basically big corporations and certain government organizations are pretty much controlling what we see, hear, and think. They have unlimited amounts of funds. Some of these big corporations, they can completely lobby Congress, get laws passed in their favor that favors them and their shareholders, and certainly not the population. But I want to focus on health. I think one of the most important things, and I'd love to see Dr. Lipton write a book on this, is taught in schools about our immune system at an early age, because that's when brains are molded with thought, and it has the greatest impact. Once people really understand the immune system, they're going to keep away from a lot of these drugs and these poisons that are being pushed by the pharmaceutical industry.
Yes.
We know that they control the medical industry. They influence doctors. I'm sure they get compensated. They've invested $270 million lobbying Congress, And just in 2019 alone, they've invested $3 billion in TV advertising. And their whole business is based on us getting sick and staying sick. They make no money on healthy people, so there's no incentive to do what's best in our interest. And I think we ought to start educating people, children at a young age. And I'll give a perfect analogy. Imagine you had a car, your first car, and you were told that car has to last you the rest of your life, and you can't trade it in for a new one. How would you treat that car? You'd put the best oil, the best gas. You'd take such good care of it.
I wouldn't wear it out, right?
That's right. You can't trade it in for a new one. Well, how about your body? You can't trade that one in for a new one. So anyway, that's the point I want to make.
Thank
I know
you.
I don't have enough time to talk about some environmental issues. That's a whole thing. But I think the health thing, and also I want to just state my opinion. This is from a lot of research, not just in the last few months what's happened, but in the last 7 years, is I think there's something very, very bad behind this whole thing. There's all types of information that's starting to leak like a sieve that's completely contradictory to what we're hearing on the news. There's doctors now reporting that a lot of these medical people are being basically given reports and told how to fill out a death certificate and pretty much naming COVID as part or the main cause when actually it's a second or third cause or any cause.
That's what Dr. Lipton was saying.
He's absolutely right, and I've seen a lot of information. Information now is being censored like crazy. Truth is apparently is a weapon for the pharmaceutical industry, and they have the power to block it out. So I think educating ourselves, our immune system, our health, that is our best insurance policy, and that's where the focus should be.
Yes.
Once they get a hold of, of the influence they have, they're just going to have you just treating symptoms with poison that just leads to more side effects, and then they have another drug for that. So
I definitely know that we have loud voices now, and everybody on the planet is online, so you can get to information, and you don't necessarily have to get it from the news. You can really start to dig and do your own research and find your sources.
I encourage people to spend 20% of their time listening to mainstream media on critical issues like this, and the other 80% search out credible information. There are scientists, doctors, PhDs, economists, brilliant people that have no motivation other than to expose truth. There's very little money in exposing truth, but there's millions, or billions, if not trillions, in concealing it.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for that dose of reality. I appreciate your just a fresh voice. And tell me one thing that you are grateful for that you maybe took for granted before.
I think I'm grateful that I kind of learned at an early age how important it was to take care of your body. I played sports in school, and I knew if it wasn't at my strongest, my best, it would compromise my performance. So I think that's something grateful that, I just never, I just used good judgment. I didn't really care, if I was at a party and I wasn't drinking, that was okay with me. I didn't care what people said, and I think that's an important thing because there's really nothing more important than your health.
You are absolutely right. Your body is your temple. Hey, thank you for your call. I appreciate it, Bruce. You take it easy. That's very, very good, especially at a young age, to actually learn that your body is your temple and that you can actually do something about it. Let's see here. Going back to the phones, I've got Annie from Alabama. How's it going, Annie?
Oh, thank you so much for taking my call. I had to use the cell phone tonight. I hope it's a good connection.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. What's going on? What can we help you with?
I've always wanted people locked up that were just downright nasty. If somebody's in a straitjacket or they're paralyzed, they can't cover their mouth when they cough and sneeze. And I certainly feel you if that's the way somebody is. But people that have the capability to cover their mouths when they cough and sneeze, they're just filthy. I've always wanted these people locked up. And finally, they're going to lock somebody up for being that way. They walk right by my house.
Oh, I see. Yes.
I'm leery about going out to cut the grass because there's so much about the virus we don't know.
I think we're a lot more aware of this now, though, Annie. I think that with the protection and the masks and staying out of people's space and not doing that handshakes and all of that I think we're going to be 100% more health conscious after this. during this than we've ever been, and I don't think we're ever going to go backwards. I actually do like the level of awareness that's being raised.
I don't know whether it's also a plant virus. We haven't gone that far as to find out. Is it also a plant virus? Can plants replicate it and spread it? We've got plant viruses. And then how about mosquitoes and flies and any kind of bug that happens to light or land right where one is, a fresh one that's just been laid down, and the fly has these feet that are like glue.
Try to stay away from mosquitoes at all cost. That is a good point.
I don't know. I'm worried about how it could be spread when the bugs come out. I don't know all about all that.
Well, tell me one thing that you took for granted before that you appreciate now more than ever. Tell me one thing, Annie.
Being able to go to church.
Yeah. Yeah, baby. Yeah. Well, you know what? We can also celebrate here and celebrate God here. Okay? And you'll get to go back to that church, my friend. Thank you for calling. All right. Let's see. I think, we're not near that break yet. We have Thomas in La Jolla. Thomas, how are you?
Hello, Lisa. You know, your voice is healing, and you have the most healing sound on radio in terms of your voice, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you, Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. What can we do for you tonight?
And I think that's, since we don't have much time, I think for me, what I took for granted is women and the goddess, if you will. And I feel that, that all of us we take for granted women in our culture, in our politics. We don't realize the inherent goddess culture, that is there. I'll give you an example, Lisa.
Okay.
You can have a woman who is 30 years old, okay, and she has a child. And that child comes out of her body, does not come out of her body as a 30-year-old child. Do you get?
Right, yeah, that would obviously be painful.
Yeah, okay. And so the child comes out of this 30-year-old woman brand new, with brand new organs, brand new glands, brand new nervous system, brand new stem cells, etc. And when you stop and think about that happens, childbirth happens every day on planet Earth. Okay, well, you can extend that to that women are vessels of immortality.
Creation,
because
yes.
They can create out of their body brand new cells, brand new stem cells, organs, glands, blood, etc. That means that there is the possibility that they can transmute, transform, alchemicalize their own bodies into immortality. Does that make sense to you, Lisa?
It does. And I want to say that we can't do it without you guys. There's...
Well, yeah, okay, I'm going to challenge that too.
Okay.
If you Google or if you go to the public library and research Immaculate Conception, okay, virgin birth.
Right.
Okay, people like anthropologist Margaret Mead and Lyle Watson, they wrote about this, that throughout history, women have conceived, and many women have reported that they did not need male seed to reproduce. Isn't that interesting? And there's lots of examples of that.
What you're tapping into is the creation of the universe. And I mean, look at seeds and plants and how they can regenerate and rejuvenate as well and be carried into miraculous places. It is truly a thank you so much for this conversation, because it is about the giving of life. And it's a great time to talk about that too, because as we approach the holiday, this season that we're in right now, it's a good time to have a reverence for the creation of life. So thank you for that. I can always rely on you to bring in a conversation that is so uplifting. Thank you. All right. Well, I guess we are going to go to a break. And thank you, Dan, for the approval. All right. We'll be right back. I'm Lisa Garr. You're listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am here taking your calls on open lines on this lovely Friday night. Let's go to Tom in Utah. Hey, Tom, how's it going tonight?
Excellent. I was impressed with Dr. Lipton and his recommendation that you love your pets. In my area of expertise, I had to study the viruses and bacteria and parasites in livestock. I actually worked for Ezra Taft Benson, Secretary of Agriculture, back in the late 50s and early 60s.
Are you a veterinarian?
Veterinary pathologist.
Ah, gotcha.
Pathologist overall. In other words, I work with not only the animal diseases, but the human recipient.
Oh,
that's
interesting.
Quite a strange word. I've been really ashamed of my fellows because they've never opened their mouth in this epidemic and clued the population in on the real petri dish, reservoir, and vector of this disease. Remember, in the original reports out of China was that they were suspecting it came from the bat.
Right. Then that transferred to the animals, right?
And then the animals get transferred into man because he's violated the law of Genesis 1 and 29, where he was told to live in the garden. We walked out of the garden into the slaughterhouse. And when we walked into the slaughterhouse and we shed innocent blood, we received the destroying angels, as I refer to them, from the tissues of the creatures, which do not harm generally the creatures because they're elevated temperature and more vigorous immune system that they have. But then we drag those organisms into our body, drops down to our temperature, and that activates the organisms.
So that's how the pathology transfers from the bats to the animals to the humans.
Yeah, I have just a real brief, curious story. I was on the way down to Los Angeles. The film people have used me for an educational resource for decades. The trade secret of the film industry is to go vegan. And I call myself the vegan cowboy scientist because in my early years, I was afflicted with a strep infection that caused damage to my heart as an infant or a toddler. When I got into college, I decided I wanted to find out how to remedy my own problem. And in that process, thankfully, I ended up working in veterinary pathology as well as human. And I realized that my strep infection as a toddler came from the cows that my mother and father were herding and milking for milk. That streptococcus, we call it in the lab the appropriate name, bovine streptococci.
Oh, wow.
And guess what? In the laboratory, we call the organisms by their name, but we always attach to general hosts. So when you're talking about streptococcus in the laboratory, we call it bovine streptococci or bovine tuberculi or bovine staphylococci. In the lab, we call it by its name. But we never let the public know that because it would harm the industry.
Wow, yes, yeah. But still, that makes a lot of sense. That's
and
basically...
by the way, this pathogenic curve, the graph that they're talking about, it's the exact curve in the animal mass, and we're just following it. So every time people are starting to say, well, we've come to the peak, well, the peak occurred in the animals already. When it drops off in the animals, then it drops off in the humans because the source of the organism is the animals that you drag into your kitchen like a stupid physician and butcher and slaughter like a stupid physician in a surgical theater working without gloves.
Okay. So, I mean, you make a lot of, that's good to hear in a way that the peak is dropping in the animal communities. Well, thank you so much for your message on veganism as well. I have to take another quick break, and when we come back, we will come back with your questions. I'm Lisa Garr. You're listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr, and I am going back to our phone lines here. I am loving these calls. Thank you so much for your energy tonight and all your great questions. James in Brooklyn. James, what you got for us tonight?
Oh, Lisa.
Hello.
The time once was when I could scrape by, pay my rent and utilities, and feed myself. Here in the local Brooklyn cash economy, I would say like going back to the 70s and then in the late 80s. But as time progressed, I realized that the rents are going so sky high.
Yes.
But I would put the question, nevertheless, if someone could be found, and I'm sure there still are, getting by and managing just like cash wages and tips, I would ask, could someone on a short leash in the cashless gig economy, conducting all their business on online platforms? I understand that $350 billion that Congress has put into the banks, I believe, in order to where the unemployed might go and apply for these benefits. The banks themselves, the big banks, are actually dropping that business. They're not cooperating. They don't
cash business. You mean
profitable? Well, how could they sell this gig online economy to everybody? They would need something like this a virus emergency, I think,
So how do we not go to the gig economy and do still the cash economy? I mean, it's really attempting to be overtaken.
It's like Noam Chomsky said, it's a manufactured crisis. They're aiming to get consent. I don't know if you've got time for one more, but something that Dr. Lister said. He said that to go on a ventilator entails like going and being made unconscious. Would you be able to clear that up? Like, would that involve like a morphine drip?
I can't specifically speak to that, but what he was basically talking about was if the body is injected with any type of foreign substance like that, it takes it away from its innate ability to recover or heal itself. So that's where he was going with it, and I know that...
I'm sorry to waste your time with that.
You didn't. No, you're not wasting my time.
That, as I understand, is basically, that's like, wow, a morphine drip is for someone who's like terminally ill.
Right, in pain. But listen, let me ask you a question, James. Can you tell me something that you took for granted before that you are grateful for now?
Something I think I always took for granted before I entered therapy, which I've been at now for, I would say, like 15 or 20 years. But before that, I took for granted that I'm going to be a very lonely fellow, that somehow I had just drifted away from friends. I never was one for hanging out, and this is like in the 1970s in Brooklyn.
And now you have friends?
And now I believe I've climbed out of that very lonesome situation where I wouldn't have paid my electric bill. I'd be sitting by a battery-operated radio with a flashlight, reading and taking notes.
And you've climbed out of that. Well, welcome, and thank you for being here. We appreciate you. All right. Thanks for the phone call. Great call. Let's see here. We've got Mike in Denver. Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Good morning, Lisa. Thank you so much for taking my call. It means a lot. First and foremost, happy Easter weekend to you and yours.
You too.
Yes. So I did have a couple of comments tonight. First of all, on the kind of coronavirus. So I have spoken with you before, and I have read your books. I'm a big believer in a lot of what you say in your books. And, I thought it would be kind of interesting because, I'm 24. I'm a millennial, and I continue to believe that, millennials our opinions do matter on
Yeah.
Coast to Coast and on the radio.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of youth, passionate about radio, and it's something that I really have always been very, passionate about. And so, getting to my comment, Lisa, in your book, Becoming Aware, which was an excellent book.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's interesting how we can apply those kind of ideas to the current situation, which I feel our world has never seen before.
Right.
How can we become more in tune with our spiritual self right now in these circumstances, and kind of become one with ourself?
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted to ask you how you're dealing with this, how you're passing the time, because me, I'm kind of in a unique situation. I'm 24, and it does make it a lot harder being the age I am. Our youth having a harder time dealing with this, because there's already so much anxiety for the millennial generation, I feel.
Yeah.
And it just adds so much more. But I feel like the best way to get through this is together. And Coast to Coast plays a huge part in that. And, I wanted to get how you're dealing with this, how you're passing the time.
Well, I totally appreciate this question because it's right up my alley. I have chosen to be a leader in this community of talking about what I've talked about for 20 years. I think this is the time for the consciousness community to step up and to be talking about what immune system building, mindset strength, things that you appreciate, gratitude, action steps that you can take to create the new normal, finding how you can be a leader in your own family, household, business, self-entrepreneurship, side hustle, whatever it is that you got, to be able to take charge rather than waiting for us to be told what to do. We get to create that new normal, and the longer that we wait for to be told what the new normal is, the worse we're going to feel about it. So I turn around and ask that question to you, my friend. Mm-hmm. What leadership role can you take in your life to create the new normal?
Well, Lisa, in my life right now, I'm staying with my parents through this.
Good. Yeah.
And it's a unique situation because I've already graduated college. Thankfully, I don't have kids to worry about, because I know that has to be exponentially harder having children through this. And I know you have a daughter yourself, and that has to be it adds so much more pressure to the whole situation. How do you coach a kid through a situation like this? They're out of school,
right?
They, have anxiety so much.
A really good way is routine, and we are kind of beings that need some form of routine in our lives. So if you can stick to some form of structure, she's been writing a list of what she's going to do every day, and she'll start off with working out, and she'll hit like a few, 3 or 4 things on the list, not all of them, but at least she goes for structure. And
right.
I think that we all need some form of structure in our lives. If you can create a routine for yourself, or, follow a clean eating food plan, if you get a chance to, that can get you on a social diet plan, or something that gives you accountability, connection, health, fortitude, and motivation. And I mean, there's a lot of free online things right now. People are offering food programs and tutorials, and there's motivation classes, and there's exercise workouts. There is so much free stuff right now. If you've got a phone and access to the internet, then you can probably get access to it. And I also appreciate that you're even listening, that you're listening to Coast, that you're asking these questions, because you are our future, my friend.
Well, I appreciate that. And, Coast to Coast, a lot of people, because I am a kind of a frequent caller, and, people say, Mike, why do you invest so much time and energy into Coast? And I say, because Coast to Coast AM is vital. The things that are talked about on this program are so important to not only the millennial generation, but to every age group, I feel. And, I was wanting to answer your question about gratitude real quick before I...
Okay.
So the one thing that I kind of took for granted, and this may sound selfish, but sports.
Yeah.
We've been seeing so many... I've been seeing a lot of classic sports being played on, the networks of ESPN lately. And I never really took the time to really appreciate live sports and the opportunities they provided for so many people across this country. And, there's so much revenue and jobs that depend on sports. I mean, millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Especially the live venues. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's probably one of the biggest things, Lisa, I took for granted.
Well, we hope they come back. We really do, because we want to be able to commune again. So I thank you so much for your call. I really appreciate it. And I think I have time for another caller here, if we can get in. Charles from Elgin, Texas. Hey, Charles, how's it going? Good to see your name up there.
Hey, I hope that you can hear me. My phone is kind of scratchy, I guess.
You're good.
Mostly because I grew a long beard and mustache after started around Christmas time. So.
Yep, no one to cut hair right now. Yep.
That's right.
What's your question?
Anyway, so I hope you can hear me all right.
Yes.
I think it's really important if people can. There's an article that I've been talking about because I want people to know there are a lot of experts in the world. I mean, really top experts, not the kind of people they drag off the street somewhere for some, national news show, some TV doctor or whatever it is. There's some real top experts in the world that are questioning this whole coronavirus panic. And they have their views are definitely worth listening to. And I think there's an article online. You can find it in there's at least two websites I know that have it. And it's called 12 Experts Questioning the Coronavirus Panic.
Great.
And there's another article that's also 10 more experts questioning the coronavirus panic. So there are lots of very high level experts, actually probably more knowledgeable than whatever.
I appreciate that. Yes. No, thank you so much. That's a great contribution to tonight. Anything else that you want to share? Tell me one thing you're grateful for that you took for granted before.
I've been doing the best I could since the very beginning of all this stuff to get people to not panic.
Yeah.
Not be in fear. I mean, if you believe all the stuff about this, that you're hearing on the news, still, they're just reasonable things you can do. People just don't have to go crazy.
Yeah.
I remember this. I did this years and years ago when all these people were, the AIDS thing going on and everything else. And I was talking to people, we knew some gay people and stuff. And they were like, they were just so panicked and they were feeling so bad. And they're just all going to die or whatever. And I just, the idea is just be reasonable and don't go crazy. Anyway, so
yes.
What do I feel like I've, let's see.
That you took for granted before that you appreciate now, which actually you just explained.
Yeah, well, one of the things, I guess, I used to, I don't know if I took it for granted, but it was nice to go to, I used to go to I would go to a tavern or bar, whatever it is, and sit around with people.
The community, yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate. I mean, I enjoyed. I don't know if I ever really took it for granted, but it would be nice to have that again. And I don't think. I think there's just.
Ooh, we have run out of time. I'm so sorry. Thank you for your phone call and keep that beard trimmed. All right. I appreciate you guys, and that is one thing I will never take for granted is our wonderful community of Coast to Coast listeners and the family here at Coast to Coast. Thank you so much. Dan Galanti for being with me here in studio, Gina Salvati on the phones, and Tommy Danheiser, George Norrie, Lisa Lyon, and everyone in this Coast family that makes it work. Stephanie Smith and Chris Boros, you guys are amazing. And our everybody. So thank you so much, and you for listening. Remember, you can go to theawareshow.com/health now and check out the health series that I've just produced for this particular time. I really appreciate you for being here with me tonight. Your energy makes this show happen. Until next time, I'm Lisa Garr, and I appreciate you for listening tonight.